All right, guys. So now we're moving on, and we're going to talk about front head control from the 4-point position, right? So again, we've got basically the 3 layers of front head positions, right? Our best position would be turtle, and then we've got a 4-point or a tabletop position, which would have our front head here, or standing. Typically, when Placido goes from turtle to standing and he's weight bearing, he tabletops 4 points, and then to get up, he walks his hands to his feet, and that gives him base to posture up, right? So what I want you to remember with your pressure from 4-point is if I drive into Placido, I actually help him get up. So just think about that when we're applying pressure, right? If Placido's in 4-point tabletop position, so I want you to think about where his vulnerability is. His vulnerability is going to be pulling him forward, just like when we do, we're trying to return them to the floor. So if you drive into Placido, it's easier for him to walk his hands to his feet and start to posture. And again, Placido's ability to survive, defend these positions increases when he goes from turtle. Each layer, as he starts climbing, increases his chances of survival and chances of countering or potentially just escaping, right? So when we bring someone down a layer, we ultimately want to keep them there. If we can't keep them there, we want to keep control enough to put them back down. Because just imagine in your head, if Placido from turtle is weight bearing all the way up to tabletop, 4-point, all the way up to standing, and then we put him back down and he goes again. He's weight bearing, he's walking up. So I want you to be patient with this and not take high risks, because it's going to be exhausting for them to be weight bearing, walk their hands back and posture back up. And again, we don't want to make it easier for them. So when Placido goes from turtle to 4-point, the last thing I want to be doing is walking into him. So as Placido comes up, I don't want to walk into him here. He's going to get back up. And really, he's probably going to get back up into a position that's easier for him to slip the elbow. So what we want to be doing from the 4-point position is we want to be controlling the elbow and trying to drag it to his head and trying to keep pressure in towards us, not towards them. Because again, Placido, especially if we take his hand off the ground, it's going to be much harder for him to start walking back. He needs 2 hands to take little steps. If Placido's weight bearing and he takes a giant step with his arm, he's vulnerable to falling over in that direction. So he keeps balance and takes sort of micro adjustments. So we have our front head, again, the same principles we've explained previous, chin strap and a tight elbow. And when we grab their elbow, we're trying to pull that to the head. So now I'm sprawling way back. Placido's trying to stand.
It's not easy.
He's going to really be bearing a lot of weight. So again, we don't need to rush these positions. We just need to control them. And again, a great drill would be to practice your ability to control it while your partner keeps getting back up. So you keep positioning as best as possible. Obviously, give them a little leeway so they can actually climb up, and just keep returning them to the mat. Seeing which spots you can hold them and control them in for longer. But again, say, realistically, what I would say looks like in a jiu-jitsu context is if Placido does get back to his feet, really we're probably going to return him all the way to turtle. And as he starts climbing up, we're going to keep him returning from basically the tabletop 4-point position. But again, don't rush it. And some of the big, basically, do's and don'ts from this position, absolutely do not go for a guillotine from here. And that goes for arm in or high elbow. You're going to fall off every time. The time to hit a guillotine is from turtle position. When they're turtle, we don't have far to fall. When they're tabletop, may seem like a good option, but it's high risk from that. Generally speaking, especially against athletic guys, you dive on that guillotine, you fall straight off. So we're going to cover some of the more realistic submissions from this position, which would be basically a seated arm triangle and also a seated anaconda choke. Those are realistic from here. Arming guillotines, regular guillotines are not. Generally speaking, our priority from 4-point is to get him back down to turtle. Getting back down to turtle, our chances of attack increase, his chance of escape decrease. So we'll show some submissions from here, some ankle picks, ability to reshoot from here. But above all, I want you, if you're learning these positions, to practice controlling your opponent. The harder it is for him to get up, the more he suffers, the more likely he's going to make a mistake and give you an attack. But like anything in jiu-jitsu, when your opponent's comfortable, patient, and relaxed in defensive positions, their chances of escape increase. So you need to mount pressure from there, and that pressure is going to give you opportunities. All right, guys, so we're going to look at a seated anaconda entry. So I want you to remember, I've always said don't go for guillotines from basically standing front head or 4-point front head, but the anaconda choke is very realistic from this position. So we need to cover some details on why this works from here, right? So one reason we can freely attack front head sort of neck submissions from here is because Placido's hands are on the floor, right? Placido's 4-point. His hands are holding him up. He cannot take his hands off the ground to defend a strangle. And this would be true if he was on his knees from here. His hands are holding him up. If he's on his elbows, now he can use his hands to grip fight. So this is the vulnerability when Placido is either 4-point or on his knees. To stay in these positions, he has to be on his hands to stay up. He can only basically hand fight submissions when he's on his elbows. So that's where we're free to attack from here. And another important detail from this position, right, is what's difficult about getting anacondas. And that's when guys take their elbows far from the neck, right? So again, when Placido is in this tabletop position, he generally speaking has his elbows relatively close to his head, and that allows him to get height. The further Placido's hands walk away from his body here, outwards, the lower he ends up being and the more vulnerable he is to tipping over. You can see here his base is already pretty weak, but when his hands are close to his head here, he can get height and he has better balance, right? But of course, the closer your elbows are to your head and the biceps are to your carotid arteries, the greater chance we are going to have of snapping a real tight anaconda choke from here. So again, we eliminate two of the things that cause us the biggest problems in attacking strangles from this position. And to start this demonstration off, we've got another thing we can do that really traps their hands close to their neck, their arm close to the neck from here. So let's look at it from this angle here. So the first detail is I step my knee next to his elbow, right? Because again, even though it's going to jeopardize his balance, realistically, Placido or someone that's athletic enough could momentarily take this arm off the ground and keep the elbow away from the neck. That's going to kill our ability to hit this seated anaconda, right? So when I make this transition, I'm going to place my outside knee next to his elbow here. And that's going to trap his arm next to his body momentarily. So look at it from this angle too. So when we start making this first adjustment, my knee blocks his elbow. And now when Placido is trying to pull his elbow away from his head, there's a block. Obviously, if I didn't have that, he could hide that elbow, right? So the first step to this sequence is we are going to switch from front head and chin strap. I'm going to place my knee on the floor, tuck my foot, and step my outside knee close to his elbow. What I do next is from our elbow and front head, I don't just reach straight for the bicep here. What we want to do is we're going to run wrist to wrist until we get super deep, and then we secure it. because that's going to draw his shoulder to his neck, and it's going to start to have this effect. And once we've got him here, it's going to be really easy, even if you don't have long arms, to secure this seated anaconda. So we've got Placido here. I drop to a knee, I'm tucking my foot, and I create an ankle. We go wrist to wrist, elbow to elbow, and then we lock it up, right? We've got to be careful from here though. I don't just want to fall to my right side. Placido is going to hop over my left leg. And that's going to make it very difficult to secure the strangle. It's going to have weight on me. It's going to slowly strip my hand from my bicep here. So what we want to do when we recreate this situation, again, chin strap elbow, I tuck my right foot and block with my left knee. And we go wrist to wrist, elbow to elbow, and we feed those arms deep so that we can get our right arm super high up our bicep and around the back. And we reach as far as we can up the back without jeopardizing our inside bicep grip. So once we secure it, we don't want to do anything that's going to slide this hand down. And we don't want to make any adjustments. One of the keys for anacondas and darces is once you lock it, don't start re-locking the hands, especially unless you have control over this outside arm. The second we make an adjustment to get this deeper, our hand slips, they start to get an elbow wide, and we never recover it, right? So we step in, wrist to wrist, elbow to elbow, we lock it up, and when you sit back, I want you to throw your legs wide so you're reaching for a closed guard. So I sit away from Placido, and I secure my legs around his body. And now the trick is a little bit of rotation. So I'm not arching like a guillotine. I'm pulling my elbow towards my groin and I'm pulling my right elbow to my groin and lifting my left elbow. And we get the strangle from here. So you can see it's a rotation pressure. And especially with the closed guard, we've absolutely secured Placido's ability to move, right? So let's look at it from another angle here. Chin strap, elbow grip, everything exactly perfect as if we were doing the fundamental section of this, right? If we're not already on a knee, I want you to drop to a knee and sit through. So again, we're trapping his elbow to his head. And now with our hands, we're reaching both super deep. Again, this isn't something we could realistically do from another spot. If Placido's total, I don't have the luxury to reach my hands through like this. Placido's just gonna grab a wrist. And now he's blocked it. Now we can get his elbow wide, and now we've lost our attack. But again, because he's in a 4-point, he requires those hands on the floor to remain stable in this position. We have the luxury of reaching everything perfectly deep. And then we can secure our chin strap hand to our outside bicep, and we can throw that arm over the back. Now we sit back and away to look to catch a closed guard. We don't arch or hip in. We just provide some rotation. So I bring my right elbow tight and I lift my left elbow. And don't squeeze hard. Squeeze to a level that you could maintain for 30 seconds even. If you squeeze super tight, what can sometimes happen is you can be strangling him, but you fatigue your arms and you may try to make an adjustment and they slip out. So slow and steady pressure. If the submission is on correctly, you will get a tap probably within 4 to 5 seconds without expending any energy of yourself. So a lot of people are scared of these upper body submissions on the neck because a lot of the time with their poor technique, they squeeze super hard to either get the tap or lose it, and they're fatigued afterwards. This position should be so perfect that you could hold it indefinitely. So the goal isn't to have the quickest submission possible, it is to reach a pressure that they cannot withstand and that you could withstand for a long time. So we'll go one more, facing this direction. 4-point front head, knee drop, pivot in, and elbow block with your knee. Reach both arms super deep and your chin strap arms grabbing the other bicep. That hand comes out and reaches as far up their back as possible. We sit away and we secure the front head. So we secure the closed guard and we add a little bit of rotation to it. Something you can do when you're drilling is just to try to get the submission with the least amount of squeeze as possible. Ask your training partner, talk to your training partner. That's why they're there. The less athleticism and squeeze that it takes to get the submission, the better your technique is going to be. All right, guys, so we're going to talk about what we do when the 4-point anaconda, our opponent doesn't give us the right response, right? So when we did the standard 4-point anaconda, we pulled close guard. We're able to wrap our legs around them. Sometimes we deal with people that are so strong or athletic that once we cinch up the grip, they manage to stand up. But that doesn't mean we have to give up on the submission. It just realistically means that I'm probably not going to finish it from the standing position. But again, just like I told you about layers of control, the height they are off the ground, the less likely we are to have control or ability to finish. So we need to return them to the mat. So we can do that quite easily from this position. So everything's the same. We blocked it here, but you see, maybe I'm trying to pull Placido, but he's so strong, he stands up. Again, realistically, I'm probably not going to finish a submission here unless I have a huge strength advantage, but we can trip him here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to fall to my left butt cheek and try to kick out Placido's left foot. So you're going to know where Placido's left foot is because realistically, he's going to be circling to my right. Exactly. And we can sit and catch that leg. So let's go from the wall a little. Run this hip. So we've landed here. So we can finish the anaconda from here, right? I can start to walk into Placido and start to push my chest and stomach out. And we can get a submission. But sometimes if Placido keeps walking with me, sometimes we never quite generate the pressure to get the tap. But again, sometimes we can, and if you want to finish from here, what you rely on is collapsing their head into your stomach. So I'm bringing my chest forward and I'm walking into them, right? But again, if they can't do that, we need to get height and secure our legs around them. Basically, we're going to finish from mount. A lot of people are going to be thinking, how do we get up from here? And it is quite difficult to learn at first. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a leg scissor to create momentum. So I want you to hip switch, so your lower legs forward and your upper legs back. We're going to switch those legs and drive our forehead into the ground. So we go switch, and that allows us to get height. So I'm walking on my head until I can wrap my legs around Placido. And then the finish here is the same rotation to get the finish, right? So again, it's rotation, not squeeze. In the training room, you should be aiming for perfect technique. Like, we're not competing against our training partners, we're training with them, right? So if in the pursuit of perfect technique, we lose the technique, that's fine, that's a learning experience, right? In competition, I can understand if you, with the adrenaline, you end up squeezing, you get the tap, but maybe you injure the neck. But in the training room, there should be no circumstances where you're squeezing a strangle like this so hard you hurt their neck, right? And of course, in my opinion, if you're squeezing to the point you're hurting the neck, you're hurting your chances of staying, basically maintaining endurance for the rest of the match or the training session. If your squeeze hurts their neck, you're probably squeezing yourself so much that you're going to fatigue, right? So again, we should be aiming for perfect technique, and that means rotationary pressure, not just pumping the biceps, squeezing as hard as we can. And again, we try to collapse. From the side, I'm trying to collapse Placido's head. And I do that with my chest by bringing my chest forward, and that's going to cause his neck to collapse into the strangle. Not collapse in such a way that it hurts, but collapses in such a way that it collapses the carotid arteries. So let's do it one more time from a different angle, right? Exact same anaconda setup as we did in the previous video. We use our kneaded block. We reach both arms deep. But I'm trying to pull and he's not coming. He stands up. He's circling to my right. I sit on a hip and trip the leg. So again, if we were to finish from here, right, I bring my chest forward to collapse his neck into a walker circle. I bring my chest forward. So watch what happens to his neck. If I just squeeze out here, we might get the tap, but it's not going to be very quick. If I bring my chest in, we start to get that tap. But of course, sometimes when we walk, they walk, right? And we don't get this finish. So we need to do a hip switch. So spread your bottom and top legs far apart. Start in the opposite direction till you're going to hip switch them. You're going to scissor these legs. Scissor the legs, drive your forehead to the mat. If you don't drive your forehead to the mat, you'll never get up. You'll be like, how is he doing this, right? So when you hip switch, drive your forehead, put weight on your forehead, and walk foot to foot. And we can step over the mount. And again, no squeeze, just rotation. And we're going to get that submission. And that's going to be how to basically maintain the anaconda from a 4-point when your training partner or an opponent is so strong they stand back up. Don't try to finish it from standing. Likely burn your arms out, likely miss the submission. We can hit a uke waza or a sacrifice throw to put them on their back. We can try to finish side to side, but again, we walk, they walk. So we hit a switch, forehead post. If you remember only one thing about getting up, forehead post. And then we walk foot to foot to secure the mount and finish the anaconda cleanly. All right, guys, let's talk about the seated katagatame or the seated arm triangle. I hate to bring this up because I still am a very big fan of Rodolfo Vieira, but he was submitted with this at one of the most recent UFCs. And I don't remember the guy's name that did it, but I know he was a purple belt called nicknamed Fluffy, right? So first of all, I want to say that realistically, Rodolfo was submitted because he was basically almost knocked out and absolutely exhausted. But still, Fluffy was able to hit this move on Rodolfo. And I believe it's probably an underutilized move in Jiu-Jitsu. The other person who has a very, very dangerous katagatame is Jack Hermanson. So he was able to hit Dave Branch with this and shockingly almost submitted Jacare. Jacare did an excellent defense to it. We're going to discuss that as well. But let's take a look at the move, right? So we're in our 4-point front head position. And again, Placido's ability to hand fight strangles from here is limited because, of course, his hands are occupied by preventing him collapsing to the floor. He's holding his own weight up. If you took both hands off the ground, he's going to face plant, right? So we have a little bit of leeway here. But again, not a lot of leeway because when Placido tripods for 4 points, he's actively walking his hands to his feet, getting height and climbing up, and then obviously once he's up here, these submission threats are greatly diminished. So for the seated katagatame, right, we want to hold the elbow and the chin strap, everything exactly the same. I'm going to take a step outside. We're trying to get around these arms here. And instead of like the anaconda, where my outside knee blocks this elbow, we're going to use our inside knee. So now you can see I've momentarily trapped Placido's right arm and bicep towards his ear. From here, we're reaching as deep as we can and securing a gable grip. Sometimes you can reach and connect. Sometimes you're going to have to reach both hands together and pull them through. But we want to get this as tight as possible. I fall onto my hip, pulling Placido's arm towards his own neck here. And now a mistake people make from this position is they think it's a regular guillotine. So they start arching their back and trying to pull. But really what I'm trying to do here is pull my right elbow towards my hip. And as I do that, I can make a little bit of space with my hip so I can push out and pull his arm tight. And that's where we're going to find the submission. So again, we're not arching hard. I'm pulling my elbow to my own hip here. And you can see that's going to drag his arm across his neck and secure the strangle from here. We're going to look at it from this angle as well. Let's move slightly here. So again, his hands are occupied by the ground. We're free to threaten strangles. So I create an angle here, and I use my inside knee to block his elbow towards his head momentarily. And that's when we can secure our grips here. And again, you're trying to get as deep as possible, but remember, as you pull, you're going to be able to pull this deeper. So say I get a shallow grip here, as I fall to my hip, I can pull that elbow tighter. And from here, we can start to get the submissions. So when we take that initial grip, we're going to go palm to palm. The goal is to pull this elbow as deep as possible. As we pull that elbow tighter, their arm comes across their own neck, and we can generate a strangle from that position. But the deeper we get, the better. And again, one last time, you don't necessarily need to hit the perfect depth of grip from the entry. So if I'm coming out and we can only get a shallow grip here, as I fall, I adjust. So as I fall, my right knee bumps his arm and I retighten everything. And then again, we're pulling elbow to hip here to get the strangle. So again, the seated katakatame, if you guys would have seen it in the UFC, it would have been Fluffy Hernandez and Jack Hermanson. All right, guys, so in a follow-up to the seated katakatame, and a defense a lot of guys do, is they basically concede the back. So really, I have to explain this because some people can have tunnel vision and just try to stay on the strangle, but obviously they're exposing the back. We should take the back. And if they're exposing the back, it's going to make the katakatame harder to finish, right? So let's say we've lined it up just like in the last technique, right? So again, if Placido remains basically where he is, we can start to get the strangle. But as he starts to lift his bottom shoulder and start to turn to the sky, it's basically impossible for me to finish at this point, because what he's doing with this is separating his right elbow from his neck. But again, that's not a problem, because as you can see, we can release the strangle. I'm moving my foot just so you guys can see where my arm's going. And we take this scoop grip here. And we can easily pass that off to the other arm, secure an underhook, and secure the back. So we'll do this from multiple angles, right? So again, the seated katakatame works because his right arm is blocking his carotid artery on that side, right? But as he turns to the sky, you can see he's created space there. And I just could not finish from this position. So instead, we're going to take a scoop, pass it off to the other side, start to look to get in our hooks, and I lift him with that underhook to secure the body triangle and get that grip there. So one more angle. So Placido starts opening towards the sky. We take this grip, we pass it off to the far side, and we've got our back control ready to go. So again, because the seated katakatame is quite a rare submission, it's gained some popularity again because of Fluffy Hernandez and even further back, Jack Hermanson. Again, people really don't have an understanding of how to defend it. So you'll see high-level guys get caught with it, but the defense is quite simple. You can expose your own back. But again, it's not a great defense because you're going from a strangle to a back exposure. So you're buying yourself some time, but depending on how good your back escapes are, it's really going to depend on how much time it's buying you. All right, guys, let's take a look at the same side ankle pick from the front head 4-point position. So first what we're going to look at is if you look at Placido in a 4-point position, For him to build back up to his feet, obviously with weight on the back of his neck, he's not just going to be able to posture up. He has to walk his hands closer to his feet, brings his center of gravity underneath him, and now he can start to lift his hands off the mat. What I want you to imagine, right, the ankle pick, if we set it up and use it at the wrong time, if I try to ankle pick Placido here, first of all, a lot of his arms are carrying the weight. So it's not going to be as easy to just pull his foot out and sweep him here. We need to time it so that his hands are closer to his feet. So he's basically, his center of gravity is all in the same spot here. So you can see he's going to be much less stable from this position. Also, when his hands are forward, and we think about us having a front headlock here, his legs are actually further away. So not to mention, it's going to be harder to get. It's also going to be harder to finish from that position. So let's take a look at it on this side, right? So we're in our 4-point position. If I were to try to reach for his ankle here, it's going to be much harder to get. And if I do get it, it's going to be harder to send his weight that way. So the time to go for it, again, is when Placido's hands are closer to his feet. You can see when we reach from this position, his ankle is going to be right there. And because his basically center of gravity is in the same spot, it's going to be easier to knock him over. Another thing to think about, right, is we are not so much pulling his ankle out, we're more holding it in position and sending his body weight in that direction, right? So when I get to here, my goal isn't to lift his foot off the ground, because really you can see based on his weight distribution, that foot's going to be very hard to lift. What we want to do, we want to move his upper body in such a way that he would have to take a step with that foot. So if I push Placido backwards, square, he might take a step with either foot. But if he comes forward again, if I push his head over that ankle and he doesn't take a step, he's going to fall over, right? So if you come back up, so you take a step where it feels natural, that's how he's going to catch his balance, right? So that's the trick with the ankle pick, especially the ankle pick from the 4-point. But it would be true even from a seated position. If I were to try to catch Placido here, Placido's playing guard, what I want to do is block his foot and take his weight over that foot. And that's how we seat him to the floor. So it's visually the same as from a 4-point position. So from here, I'm going to use my front headlock chin strap grip to throw his head over his ankle. So I'm taking the chin strap, basically trying to touch it to his foot here, and I hold the bottom of his ankle. I try to get my finger to the floor. If I have it higher, he could potentially still step it. But if I have at the end of the lever, he tries to step, it's blocked. And if he did try to step, that's when we could lift. So as he steps his foot, it's easier for me to lift. Again, I'm not pulling it off the floor. I'm blocking it, taking his head over that foot. And if he does start to lift his foot, as we take his weight, that's when we can scoop the foot up. So we've got our chin strap. I bring my knee as close to that foot as possible as he's walking backwards. And we start to bowl his head over the top, and then we can lift it. I try to get head over head immediately. Obviously, going full forward into him, good chance you can end up in a submission, but lift that foot and try to get head over head to consolidate the position. So once again, Placido is in his 4-point position or his tabletop position. And again, we're timing it so as his hands walk closer to his feet, that is when we hit the ankle pick. First of all, it's more powerful because of the position of his center of gravity, and also his foot is more within reach. So we've got our chin strap here. I'm going to drop my knee close, catch the base of that foot, take his head towards the leg I'm ankle picking, and lift that foot and immediately get head over head. And that's how we would do the same side ankle pick from the 4-point position. All right, guys, so we covered the straight ankle pick. Now we're going to talk about the cross ankle pick, right? So again, some people have very good awareness, or maybe they know that this is a move you're good at, right? So Placido's in 4-point. So imagine I reach for his left foot. Let's say I got a chin strap with the right hand. I use my left hand to reach for the foot. As he walks back, he steps out of that one. So you can see here that obviously that foot's way out of range. I've missed it. And sometimes you even touch it and they'll slip straight out. So guys that are really hyper aware from these positions. But if you look at his balance here, he's going to be very vulnerable back into his left here, because he's basically, his left foot is in such a position that if we were to reach it and pull it, he's going to fall to his left hip very easily, right? So although he's defended the first ankle pick, he's left a vulnerability with his other foot. And again, like, there's no way from the 4 point he's going to jump both feet back at the same time. If he comes back to a square position, if we miss the first one, that foot's going to be there momentarily. So as long as we react quickly, we can get to this foot, consolidate the ankle pick. But really, he's going to move one foot, then there's probably going to be a second before he can move the other one, right? So if we set this up, so we've done everything right, just like the first one. And again, he's going to walk his hands back first. So we can predict some of his movement. If he's trying to get back to his feet, his hands walk, his posture comes up. If, as his hands walk, one foot hops out of the way, then the other hops out of the way. So he has a predictive pattern of movement here, right? So we time it, we're waiting for his hands to walk back. We miss this one, but you can see we have a moment to switch to the other ankle pick. And I want you to do exactly the same thing. Keep the finger as close to the ground as possible, because here he could potentially still slip that grip or power out of it. Whereas here, it's going to be very difficult. And again, if he does from here, it's easier for us to lift that and pull him to a hip. So for this one in particular, I want to get height. So we were taking his head to his right leg. Now we're going to take his head to the foot that's close, his left foot. And we can pull that up and immediately get head over head to consolidate the takedown, right? So we've got our chin strap. We've dived for this foot, but we've lost it. But we still have the chin strap, and this leg is really within reach here, so we can secure it. I can take a step towards that side with my right foot and lift and come and consolidate the position. So we'll actually look at it from this angle as well. So again, although these movements will look very quick live, we are able to do it because we can predict movement patterns. The hands come, then the foot, then the other foot. You can't move all these limbs at once because they're weight-bearing limbs. So we've reached, we miss it. We secure the other leg. I take a cross step with the outside leg, and we step up and we get head over head. So really this move's gonna come up a lot based upon their ability to predict that you are going to go for that. So the straight ankle pick is gonna work very good initially, but as guys predict your movement patterns, they're gonna give you the cross ankle pick. All right, guys, let's look at a scenario where we can hit the ankle pick when our opponent isn't moving back. So remember, for the straight and the original cross pick at Placido's 4 point, he's trying to get back to his feet by walking his hands to his feet, right? When I say get back to his feet, yeah, get up. There are some scenarios where a guy will 4 point and they basically are stalling, surviving from this point, and they're keeping their hands away from their feet. Maybe we're having trouble returning them to the mat. Maybe we're having trouble entering anything else from this position. So we do have an opportunity to cross pick here, but we're gonna have to use our head to trap an arm. Because remember, from here, if I'm trying to reach any of these ankles, basically the arms are in the way. They're keeping separation between his feet and ankles. And again, the other picks work because Placido walks his hands back to his feet and we time it so that they're within reach. For this particular one, the cross pick where we use our head, we can force an ankle pick from here by moving through this arm. Basically, I'm moving my head from next to this elbow towards his other foot. And we can sort of overpower this 4 point position, right? So we've got our regular front head from here. Well, I'm gonna take my head deep inside and reach for this cross foot. And Placido's trying to power out or posture or rebalance here. Very difficult once we trap their arm to their head with our head. So again, watch the positioning of my head on this one. I couldn't just reach easily from here because the arm's in the way. But if I keep that close to his head, and bring my head through, we can reach this other leg without Placido being able to clear either grip. So it's a way to pick when your opponent is basically 4-point and inactive. Regular picks work very well as they walk back to the feet, but from this one here, it's a 4-point ankle pick when they're stable. And we do that by moving through this arm. And again, it's the same basic mechanism of action for the pick. We need to block a foot and take his body weight in that direction through the use of his upper body position. Okay? So again, we're trapping this arm with our head and I'm moving through it. He has no block now. We can grab that foot and keep moving in that direction. So that right there is the cross ankle pick 2 when an opponent is basically staying stable from a 4-point position. All right, guys, let's talk about a misdirectional go behind from the 4-point position, right? So Placido's in 4-point, and we're starting with a double armpit grip. I've got to be shallow on these grips because if I come over the top, connect my hands, Placido does a sit out and sends me flying over the top. But his ability to hit that sit out is greatly diminished with shallow grips here. His sit out ability is going to be very difficult, right? But again, we're going deep, and a lot of beginners will do this. They'll think, oh, we're going to control, we're going to hold him to the body. He's going to hit a sit out and send me flying. So again, armpit grips is going to make that more difficult. If Placido remains stable here, realistically, I could just step behind the arms and take his back, especially if I can step deep into that armpit and get behind. Because my greatest danger here is if I start to circle and he comes up with an underhook, I've lost everything. So if I can step behind that arm, his ability to hit an underhook is greatly diminished and we could turn around. So Placido knows that for me to step around, obviously I'm moving in that direction and he starts to follow me every time I try to step past that arm. But I know if momentum's going this way, I can just throw him through. So think of it like you're bowling a ball, right? So I'm starting the angle change and he starts gaining momentum and we just throw him past. So again, I'm chasing Placido. I'm hoping that he leaves a hand stable that I can beat it and get behind. But he's quick. And we can throw him to get a misdirectional go behind. But again, you're realistically not going to just walk behind someone's arms, but I have to show that they have to defend it, right? If you do just walk behind someone's arms, they're probably a real beginner. But as guys know, they want to keep square to you. You're going to find this misdirectional go behind. It's going to have a much greater success rate. All right, guys. So we have to mention this, even if you're a jiu-jitsu guard pulling guy, but from the 4-point position, guys that overpower you and get back up and start getting off the feet, you can, rather than trying to sit tight and really keep them in that position, we can take a reshot, right? And the trick is, because if we look at a double leg, if Placido's up, my biggest issue is really obviously his height. I want him postured up because it keeps his head out of the way, allows me to get underneath his center of gravity, take him down. We also need to deal with the arms. We need these out of the way as well. So a great way to do that is with an elbow pass. So if I can get this arm out of the way, I have a clear shot attempt here, right? If the arm's in the way, he can down block me or frame. And we get all these things cleared through the use of a front head, especially from 4-point. Could come up from standing as well, but really if Placido's in a 4-point, watch what he does when he gets back up. Obviously imagine there's weight on him. he's trying to power up and explode up, right? So if he's moving slowly here because we're imagining weights on him the whole time. But imagine he's trying to get up, I'm holding his head down. The second I let go, he goes up very quickly. He almost goes up too far. It's an exaggerated posturing. So you can see how that, in the basics of a basic double leg, solves one problem. If Placido's in a resting stance, his head's in the way. If he postures up, his head's out of the way. If he's in a 4-point position and we're holding his head down and he's trying to explode back up, when I let go of it, he's in poor resting stance. He's vulnerable. But again, we have this arm to deal with. We still have the down blow. Because as he 4 points, these arms are staying close to the legs. They walk up and you could potentially have them in the way when we go for a shot. That's why we can do an elbow pass from here, right? Because we have this 4-point position. As Placido comes up, I can pass this arm out of the way. So he's continuing his movement, exploding upright, and we can get a great entry to a double leg position from there. So remember, the biggest challenges in getting a double leg, posture and arms. And really even true is a square stance. Placido's in a bladed stance. You can see one leg's going to be further away when I reach. He's in a square stance. I can reach both legs at the same time. And that also means that his center of gravity is narrow. It's easy to knock backwards, right? Again, his clearance for the 4-point breaks all these rules and allows us to take a perfect shot out there, right? So Placido's down. He starts posturing. We've cleared the arm. He's got bad posture and his legs are close together. So we can hit a double leg and we've beaten the 3 big challenges that come about when we try to shoot a double leg from a regular situation.